Next up, I'd like to introduce Mark Aitken. So Mark was diagnosed with myeloma about 12 months ago now, almost to the date he was saying. He's certainly had an interesting journey, and transplant now about seven or 8 months ago. So Mark's journey's not been an easy one, to put it mildly. So just as a bit of a disclaimer, please don't expect to sort of go through everything that Mark perhaps has. But I think sometimes it's wonderful just to hear from someone who's been there, done it, come out the other side, is getting back into life, and it makes a huge difference. So I'd just like to thank Mark for coming along. I know it's not always easy to get up and speak in front of a room full of people, particularly about something that's so personal and something you've undergone yourself. So we thank you very much for coming along, and I'll leave your matter away.
All right. I'm Mark. I'm 48 years old, and 12 months ago I was diagnosed with chronic kidney failure and multiple myeloma. I say it that way because the chronic kidney failure was discovered first. I was suffering from cramps. Hadn't really paid much attention to them. I was getting cramps in my legs. My wife was getting annoyed. I was waking up in the middle of the night with cramps. She asked me to go down and do a blood test. Went down and did a blood test, and I got a phone call actually very early in the morning, which is very unusual from your local GP. It was about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, asking me to come down to the Ipswich hospital. We were living on property at the time, and I got down to the Ipswich hospital, and they did some tests, and they said that my kidneys were failing rapidly. I hadn't noticed. I know I'd been a bit lethargy, a bit tired, a bit lazy, but that was the only effect that I had. So they booked me straight into the hospital, kept me there for 5 days up in Ipswich, trying to figure out why my kidneys were failing so rapidly. They brought me down to the PA hospital in Brisbane. I was there a couple of hours, did some blood tests. They called me into an office and said, "We know why your kidneys are failing. You have multiple myeloma." And from that point on, my kidneys started crashing very rapidly, and so they put me into the hospital. I was put onto a trial drug that they were using at the time called Velcade, which was on the market. It was a new drug. It's having very good success rate with a lot of patients, but didn't work for me. They tried it for a week or two. It wasn't touching the sides of my myeloma, and they went straight in for stem cell. So in the meantime, my kidneys failed a lot worse. I had a catheter put in. I was in the hospital. I was doing hemodialysis 3 times a week, 4 hours a day. They crashed so bad that I ended up on the machines 8 hours a day. With special filters, they were flying in from New Zealand at $4,000 odd a filter, mind you. And they kept me on that for 8 days, managed to get the stuff they needed out of my kidneys. And I went back to the normal regime of 4 a day, every day, 4 hours a day. And we carried on like that. Now, when we got to the stem cell transplant, because of the kidney failure, I couldn't have large doses of chemo, and I couldn't have any large doses of painkillers. So the stem cell in itself wasn't too good the first time they tried. They had a go at getting stem cells out of me. I did the injections, and we tried to collect harvest. And on the first harvest, they only got a very small harvest. So I went back, and then we did a second harvest, which was a very good harvest, but very painful for me. Because they couldn't give me any painkillers or anything like that, I had a very bad time. I was crying a lot. I was in a lot of pain. I was curled up in a ball on the end of the bed, and I had nurses rubbing my head and my back. It was a very brutal and horrible time, and this is not something that happens to every patient. All the nurses I've spoke to and doctors, I'm a one-off. Some of the doctors have never had a patient react that way at all. So it's not something that happens to everybody when they're having their stem cells harvest. It just happened to happen to me, as everything else does. And So they collected my stem cells, managed to get enough. I donated half of my, because they got such a large collection on the second time around, I donated half of them to the society to be used as they wished, and they managed to keep enough for 2 transplants for me. So I've had my first transplant and got through it and come out the other end. So that's basically what happened to me. Now, the bits in between, we were talking about side effects and stuff like that. All the side effects that you could have, I did have. I had a rash of them. You know, one thing went wrong after another for me. I ended up having 17 blood transfusions over a period of a week or so, 2 weeks, because they couldn't get my bloods to come back up because of my kidney failure. I also got adult chickenpox, so I ended up in the isolation wards upstairs. Not a very pleasant experience, but all the way through this is a great team of people. You know, they looked after me, they made me feel good, and as they said, the sense of humour and just the things you have to do is what counted, what made the difference to me. You know, they really did. You know, I had some horrible moments. I cried a lot. I was very upset. 12 months ago, I was a healthy, working, normal human being, and then all of a sudden I found myself in a hospital, plugged into machines, tubes. I've never been sick before. I've never been in a hospital before. I've never been to a dentist before in my life, if you could believe. And so this was a whole new experience for me, you know. So when I went in, and it's difficult to say, it's difficult to do. A lot of things happen, you know, a lot of things happen really fast, and you try to ask the right questions, but they can't give you the right answers there and then, the answers you want. So it becomes very frustrating, you know, and you really want these answers, but there's just no answers they can give you. So you just have to go along and trust these people to be doing the right thing by you, you know. Some of the little tricks I learned while I was going through my stem cell was, like, to the mouth ulcer thing and that, you know, that's a real thing amongst other patients that I noticed when I was in there and that. I found getting a bottle of water and half filling it, putting my name on it, and all the hospitals have got fridges and freezers around the wards, you know. So you can put your half bottle of water in, just on a bit of an angle like that, name on it, freeze it, and then fill it up with water, the rest of the bottle. So you've always got a supply of ice water. Ice water is absolutely your best friend, I guarantee it. Either sucking on an ice block or drinking ice water. It really works, and it's a really nice thing in your mouth while you're going through that, because you get your sores and your mouth gets dry, and it's not a pleasant thing. But the ice water really, really helps. The other thing is, I'm not a sort of person that eats lollies or cakes or sweet things. But while I was going through my stem cell, lollies helped. Of all things, lollies helped. You know, just eating lollies. Just the mixed kind, that's what I got, the mixed varieties. I got my wife to bring up to bring up lollies. Small chopped milks. You know, just small chopped milks like that, just to give you that boost. But the lollies made a big difference. I mean, while lying there on the machine plugged in every day, you know, eating my lollies gives me that extra little bit of energy. Getting up every day, I mean, it is so hard. And in my case, it was extra hard because I had a lot of problems and I was plugged in a lot. But just to get up and walk down the corridor and back again, you know, and sit down. You know, 2-3 hours later, get up, walk around the corridor, you know, just to move, to function. Because if you don't function, I found when I did sit in the bed, if I did 2 or 3 days in the bed, it was so hard to get back out again. My muscles had started getting sore. Things would go wrong. The more I moved, the better things got for me, you know. It was, yeah, Yeah, it's different.